legalizefreedom.com. Why are we here? Where do we come from? Where are we going? From the nature of reality to the future of humanity. Listen without limits. Unchain your brain. Change your thinking. Change your life. legalizefreedom.com.
Greetings and welcome once again to legalizefreedom.com. I'm your host Greg Moffat, and my guest today is Claire Ray Randall. An increasingly common theme in popular science is the idea that our thoughts create reality, or that they at least interact with the physical world in some way. This trend has also been mirrored in some sections of popular culture. In fact, pop culture characterisations of mysterious mental powers long predate the current scientific interest in how mind might affect matter. Taken together with the idea that mind, not matter, is fundamental and that physical reality itself actually exists within some vast non-material cosmic consciousness, the entire universe and everything in it begins to look like one infinite, unimaginably complex thought process. Cutting-edge science increasingly lends credence to this and similar ideas, which apply at each level of reality, from personal to planetary to galactic and beyond. What's more, the process appears creative and imbued with meaning and purpose, even if mainstream scientific materialism continues to refute any such possibility. But if you discovered that you're a cell in the organising intelligence which underlies everything, what would change? Hello and welcome, Claire, and thank you so much for joining us once again on legalizefreedom.com.
Hi, Greg. Thank you so much for inviting me back.
Now, today, Claire, we're going to be having a conversation. You and I have spoken in the past. People will find links to those talks on this interview page. But it was something that was kind of suggested by you, actually, around the question of synchronicity and the question of the causal properties of thought, potentially. To what realm mind affects matter. Like just generally how I would put it. So yeah, we're going to have a general talk around that today. Before we get started, do you want to say a little bit about yourself or your work, whatever, to listeners, maybe for people who haven't listened to our previous talks?
Well, I have two books out. The first one I published about 10 years ago now, Waking the Monkey. It's about the 100th monkey camp, which took place 10 years ago, a New Age camp, which was an experiential experimenting consciousness, and we should be talking a little bit about that. And I've also written more recently a book which I discussed with Greg. I think it was nearly 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, something like that, called The War on Gender, which is about the highly fraught issue of trans identity and postmodernism. And I've been interested in this whole kind of consciousness thing. Oh, well, since I was about 14, I really started thinking about this. And then more recently over the years, well, I remember I met Rupert Sheldrake at a book signing, nearly 30 years ago now. And that's a very big part of my kind of thought process and stuff. So I'm just really big into this kind of, esoteric kind of consciousness and where it comes from. And because the materialist, view of reality is so, well, it's just so passé now, isn't it? I mean, after all these years in the 21st century, we've been hearing about the spirit molecule, DMT, and ayahuasca, and all these different levels of consciousness that people are exploring. And I think it's just time this became a bit more mainstream.
Yes, I mean, that's a major topic of this podcast, increasingly so from the start over 10 years ago, but increasingly so has been the nature of consciousness and the issue of whether consciousness is fundamental. That is to say, the kind of ground of being matter arising from within consciousness, not the other way around. Of course, that's mind-bending for a lot of people. But when, as you say, the materialistic view of reality is just so unsustainable and untenable, and when you look at this consciousness as the ground of being, a fundamental reality, I mean, see my interviews with Bernardo Kastrup, for example. I think he's one of the people who's laid it out in really understandable, simple terms. As he himself says, it's the most parsimonious explanation for the experience that we're having, the one that requires, one that has the least holes in it, and has the most explanatory power when it comes to our experience of reality. So that's really where we're kind of starting from that as a base. Now, you came to me with synchronicity as kind of a headline word in what you wanted to talk about. And you mentioned again about the mechanism. And that's one of the big things in any question of psychic phenomena, mind over matter, anything like that, telepathy, you name it, premonitions, anything, many sort of mental powers. Skeptics will say, well, yeah, but how do you explain this? What's the mechanism? And I don't think we need the mechanism in order to start looking at evidence for it. However, I've always been fascinated by that. And it's one thing I always talk to people like Bernardo, like Rupert Sheldrake about. Now, we may never discover the mechanism. That's just the nature of science. Science can't explain everything. But the phenomena themselves are very, very real and have been tested, in lab conditions. People like Dean Radin, for example, doing rigorous scientific tests on psi phenomena, blah, blah, blah. So I don't know whether you want to start setting out, the document that you sent me that kind of sets out point by point the potential mechanism or what a process might look like from a thought to becoming a reality, where you want to begin with that. I will also add that if we use the term new thought or manifesting in this, we are talking about generally what is encapsulated in the book The Secret, that mainstream book a lot of people know about, but The Secret's a very watered down, misunderstood kind of reading of what it is we're talking about. Thoughts really do seem to have causative power. And so new thought is the term I prefer. It came from the USA mainly in the early 20th century. That's where the pioneers of new thought, such as Napoleon Hill, that's what they set this out. And see my interviews with Mitch Horowitz on New Thought, and because he's a great historian of New Thought. So anyway, enough from me. Why don't you just start wherever you would like?
Okay, well, thanks a lot then, Greg. I suppose I'll just kind of skim through some of the points in the first document I sent you. Now, I won't immediately propose my mechanism of how synchronicity works, because actually I think it's so incredibly obvious that I'm surprised that it's not right kind of out there and accepted and everybody knows it and agrees with it. I first came across this in about 1979. I was just really getting into esoteric thought. I was reading Israel Regardie, and I had some very kind of interesting psychic kind of experiences around that time. And I'd just been opening up. I just read the Illuminatus trilogy, which you probably are aware of, and the Cosmic Trigger, which also kind of relates to this.
That's Robert Anton Wilson, by the way, if people don't know.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And then this was a kind of starting point for my exploration into this. And then I worked in psychiatry for a bit, and then I qualified as an art therapist, and that was a big self-exploration experience. I didn't just do it for a professional qualification, although it's nice to have a professional qualification. But for me, it was about trying to understand my own mind and my own ideas and consciousness. And some years before this, even before I read Illuminatus, back in the mid-70s, I had taken a course in being introduced to transcendental meditation. And now, one of the most important things I remember from that, which brings into this business of thought, consciousness, ideas, and so forth, is in the very first introductory lesson, we were told that thoughts emerge like bubbles from the bottom of the ocean. And they start out as tiny little bubbles, and then they get closer to the surface and then become larger, and then they come into consciousness when they break through the surface. And I thought that was an absolutely wonderful analogy, you could say, for the way that thoughts work. And then also, this also fits in with fractals, because I remember, I suppose it must have been in the 1980s, in about 1986 or so, when I saw fractals on TV for the first time. I'm sure everybody has seen the Mandelbrot set by now. And I found it just incredibly kind of hypnotic, but also invigorating. And so I think these are some of the kind of underlying precursor thoughts into my own kind of understanding of how thoughts come into the world. Now, this is a very important thing. Now, in Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, this is a very important idea in how to bring thoughts into reality, right? So now in Napoleon Hill's book, he says that there is a concept embedded in every single chapter, but he doesn't highlight it or make it explicit. He just says that if you read this book carefully enough, you'll realize what idea he has embedded in each chapter. And I don't know whether I'm right or not, but I think I am. And this was something that came to me fairly easily. And I'll tell you what it is at this point. And it's quite clear. And this is something that works with, vision boards and so forth, because it's simply that this is the first law of manifestation and success, is that you have to keep a strong image in your mind of what it is that you wish to achieve and make real, and have some positive motivation attached to your thoughts with it. And this actually, Aristotle was aware of this, because Aristotle said, reason of itself does not move to action. Emotion is required.
Yeah, that's really, really important, actually. I mentioned Napoleon Hill at the top of this, and yeah, his book Think and Grow Rich is one of the keystones in the New Thought literature. And indeed, you mentioned an idea embedded in every chapter, but it isn't explicit. And yes, keeping a strong image of what you want, but it's the desire combined with emotion. That's what moves it. This is one of the principles of magic, because it's fundamentally the same thing. It's if you look at Crowley's definition of magic, which I can't quite recall off the top of my head, but it's a combination of desire and will, combining to alter physical reality. And if people are skeptical about this, but actually all of us are doing it all the time. It's just that most people are doing it unconsciously. They're not engaging with the process, and so things are more like happening to them than they are making things happen, as it were. Now, as for this, in terms of we can talk in terms of metaphysics, in terms of esotericism, in terms of everyday life. The first law of success, you need to know what it is you desire. And that's an issue in itself, because most people don't. We're not really encouraged along those lines, are we? Or if we are, a lot of people have ideas and ergo desires that are not really their own. Oh, big car, big house, lots of holidays, nice job, nice wife, etc., etc. Are those really your desires? Because if somebody else's, that doesn't work. So yeah, Think and Grow Rich, the cornerstone of this idea that thoughts are essential in building reality. And if you think about it, pardon the pun, everything that's currently a physical reality, you look around the room, the one that you're in, the one that I'm in, you'll see things that started out as a thought, devices, and things that people invented, things that at one point didn't exist. And that's where everything starts, with the thought. So it's really that's kind of the foundation principle. And again, it's because we don't have a mechanism, because physics, for example, or any other science for that matter, can't say how this would work. How could thoughts within your mind have any impact on the outside world? Then therefore it cannot be happening. If we can't explain it in scientific terms, it is not possible. But of course, science and many other disciplines are littered with things that are obviously happening. It's just, but we don't know how.
Well, I remember actually something I've thought about many times. There's a Peter Gabriel album. It's probably Red Rain, one of those. Anyway, there's a song in it that says, all of the buildings, all of the cars were once just a dream in somebody's head. And I think that he must have been reading some kind of New Thought stuff to have said that, or maybe it's just an obvious thing. But thought is organizational, and also, so thought organizes things that are there, right? So so many angles on this. So the physical universe exists. I'm willing to go with that. But the thing is that it's like a geological accretion of sediment. So everything that already exists came into existence either through other people's actions or some great cosmic forces or whatever. So we are building new forms on the surface of this. So there are some ideas. Well, ideas seem to have many different kind of levels. So there are what Jung might call big thoughts and big ideas, which would be like things that would pertain to one's personal identity and personal direction and stuff. Like, Edmund Hillary might have said, well, I just had to climb Mount Everest. My life would not have been complete if I had not climbed Mount Everest. So he had to go there, he had to train, do everything, get all the funding and everything, because that was something that was somehow or other, the universe had put that in him. I don't know whether he was like that, but I'm just saying this could be how he did it. And then on the other hand, you see a lot of stuff where people just say, well, I want to use the law of attraction to generate money and wealth and a nice house and a partner and all these things. And these are perhaps less particular, they're more kind of general. They're not, specific to somebody like Edmund Hillary or, whatever. So, then you will have other things which, but because obviously, money, wealth, a nice partner, they're all perfectly good, nice, reasonable things to have. But then you might have other things which have been kind of somehow introduced into your mind by other sources. And these might not be quite so benign as following your natural path of personal expression or having a more universal desire fulfillment, but that actually some might be, darker things or just things that are a waste of time. So I think this is something that's often kind of not really looked at in the world of New Thought. So what I'm saying is that there can be downsides to this. There can be dark sides of it. Sometimes people find that they've done some kind of sigilization for something, and then they'll get what they wanted, but then it'll turn out that part of this meant that a relative died in a car accident or something like this. So the universe works in very, very strange, mysterious ways about these things, and it likes to keep a clean balance sheet. So if things are arising naturally out of the natural processes of your life, your psyche, and so forth, then these things can be brought into reality and fruition. But then there's a whole kind of spectrum of where this might go in different directions. And my feeling about, probably might want to get into this later, but my feeling that this was actually what was going on with the 100th Monkey Camp in the 1990s. But anyway, that's probably a bit further down the line. So that's about bringing where these ideas come from. And then I think that this is kind of going into a kind of Vedic or Steinerian kind of idea, or maybe theosophical or something, that thoughts build up structures. It's like when a sculptor makes builds a model, they will build a wire frame first, and then they will pack it with clay, and then they will and gradually it builds up in various different levels. And I think this is the way that reality builds up. We start with a thought or an idea, and then we enlarge it, we elaborate it, we focus upon it, we bring it through into becoming a strong image. But then we have to build the associated kind of structures around it. And then the associated things that you require, this is another thing you'll probably recognize from New Thought, is that things that you need, I think this is kind of like a perceptual thing, because I think the things that you need, you will notice them. They're there. And if you're focusing enough on what you particularly desire and you've got this image, you will see the associations of the things which you probably wouldn't have noticed before, because they wouldn't have been meaningful to you if you weren't focusing on this idea. So then you can take these fragments that the universe is putting before you, and you can build your desire, your wish, whatever it is that you're trying to create out of those. Well, you are literally organizing the concepts, and you're organizing your world.
Yeah, the admonishment here you're talking about is basically be careful what you wish for. I mean, I'm going back now to, you mentioned it could be the dark side to these things. We think of the story of King Midas, who wished wealth for himself, but with no real meaning other than wealth for its own sake. There was no real purpose there, and of course everything he touched turned to gold, literally. His food, his furniture, his family, and that didn't end well. So I do think in all of this, people, again, I go back to what I said about people having desires that are not really their own. They're inculcated by, materialistic culture. And there's two aspects of the word materialism that you and I are using here. One is literally in the way that we know it day to day, acquisitive, consumer-driven materialism, the house, the car, and everything else. And then what we talked about as the cosmology materialist, which is that matter is fundamental and consciousness is just a byproduct of a physical brain, that way of looking at it. But I do think that in that sort of desire to create, that the idea of meaning and purpose is incredibly important. We talked about the book The Secret, and you talked about vision boards, people reading The Secret, and then on their fridge, they would, the fridge door, they would have a picture of a BMW and a McMansion and a yacht with perhaps imagining themselves on it, but no kind of meaning, like what's this for? And I've found that in terms of material things, if something more purposeful is driving you, then the material things, in my mind, I see it as resources. I want the resources in this life to be able to do what I want to do, which is the kind of thing that you and I are doing here now. So I'm not thinking about money as in like numbers on a screen or in the bank. It's resources. It might be money. It might be other material things. It could be whatever relationships. It's what it is. It facilitates what you want to do. And if that's driven by some kind of meaning or purpose or sense of that, then that is where the emotion comes into this. Because a lot of people desire wealth and nice things for themselves, and they think it's emotion driven, but it's not really. It's more coming from a position of lack, if you see what I mean. So it's actually can be quite negative in a way. And that's why so many people doing this so-called, manifesting practice or what's set out in New Thought fail. And another reason why this happens is because they don't really actually believe. They don't fundamentally believe it can work. But they, so therefore, if that's at root subconsciously, that you don't think this can have any effect on your life, then, well, it's not going to, is it? But again, the materialistic view is, we're looking for a mechanism. How could it sound? Because lacking a mechanism, it just sounds religious, doesn't it? It sounds just like praying, which, by the way, is another form of the same thing here. If that your prayer is charged with emotion, then you can read that as a magic spell. You can read it as a new thought, a practice of whatever it happens to be, assembling images or assembling your thoughts, doing meditation, writing your thoughts down again, which is part of magical practice. All of these things are interconnected.
Well, I think this makes me think about my second main thought, which was about the panpsychic universe and cymatics. Now, I'm sure you know what cymatics is. I'll just explain that cymatics is the science of resonant patterns. It was first kind of discovered by a French scientist called Chladni. I hope that's correct pronunciation, in the 18th century. And he found that bowing metal plates and producing different tones of certain different shapes and sizes of metal plates, bowing them with a violin bow, if you spread sand or salt or some fine powder on the surface, that various shapes, patterns could be created. And one of these is a famous Tibetan Buddhist shape, pattern known as the yantra, which is interlocking triangles pointing upwards and downwards. And one of the cymatic forms that's can be created is this Tibetan yantra. So somewhere along the line, somebody in Tibet, I mean, there's all this knowledge of ancient lost, technological civilizations or mathematical knowledge or whatever. So, you may also be aware of the work of Veda Austin and Dr. Imaru Emoto. They've found that strong emotions can be embedded in water, which, if frozen rapidly, can show interesting cymatic formations. Like if you embed strong positive emotions, it will produce harmonious and nice patterns. Whereas if you, try to embed obscenities or bad thoughts into it, you get very ugly, distorted patterns, which don't really have any kind of, sacred geometry or beauty to them. So cymatics, we're all creating cymatic vibrations all the time. And this is like, when you meet somebody for the first time, you get you often get an impression of them. And this will be because of the interaction of your cymatic vibrations and the other person. It's like in music, you can have pleasant tones and unpleasant tones, or, beautiful music or stuff that grates on the ear. And this is similar to how cymatic patterns affect. I mean, we know that the brain produces electroencephalographic patterns. In fact, the whole universe is held together by cymatic resonances. There are mathematical proportions in the solar system, in the human body, in the planet Earth. Well, we're coming to the point now where I might have to kind of, give it away. What I think causes synchronicity is that we are in a panpsychic ether, I think, is the term that I prefer. Certainly, Rupert Sheldrake talks about the nature of reality. Panpsychism is basically, at the root of most of what he says, things like dogs that know when their masters are coming home and this kind of stuff. Well, how does that happen? I would say that it's working at a similar level to synchronicity, which, as we said, we don't really know what the mechanism is, but it's the same, I would say, the same mechanism as what tells a dog when their master's coming home when the master is 5 miles away and completely out of earshot and setting off at a completely unexpected time. So simply put, I would say that meaning is a cymatic structure, just as music or even smell, actually. Smell is apparently detected by the olfactory and taste buds through the frequency of the vibrations, and good smells and bad smells. Some have better vibrations. They say literally that old expression, good vibrations. And meaning has a particular vibration. You're a musician, Greg. You know about sympathetic resonance between instruments. If you've got a guitar hanging on the wall and you pluck a note on the one that you're holding in your hand, if the guitar is tuned to the same tuning, the string, which has the exact same resonant frequency, will resonate. Now, obviously, this is because the vibrations are passed through the air. But when we're talking about consciousness, we're talking about the panpsychic ether. So meanings resonate together. And so a synchronicity is the confluence of two similar meaning cymatic resonances noticing each other through the panpsychic ether. Now, this is the idea that I said to you that I thought, well, surely this is such an obvious idea everybody, all the terms I've used, panpsychism, ether, and so on and so forth. These are all ideas which are well established, even if not proven, but they're well established ideas. And as one of your guests pointed out a while ago, that the actual mechanism isn't understood. But of course, we're not talking about a mechanical mechanism like Newtonian mechanics. We're talking about something in the level of meaning and consciousness. So, it transmits through the psychic level of reality. And since, well, I'm not quite sure we're ready to go to definitely proving that consciousness is pre-existent, but I think it's a kind of axiom that we probably have to go with.
That concludes part 1 of our interview. Part 2 will be available soon in the subscribers area at legalizefreedom.com.
legalizefreedom.com